The twin suns of Lyranine were sinking behind the jagged cliffs of the eastern plains, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. The air was crisp and dry, carrying the faint scent of iron and smoke from the distant battles the pack had fought earlier that day. Kara stood at the edge of the plateau, her dark hair whipping in the wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. Despite being human, she had lived among the Lyran pack for several years, learning their ways, their language, and their strict codes of honor. She had fought alongside them, earned their respect. Yet she remained, in their eyes, an outsider human who had stepped into a world of legends and power struggles. Today, the weight of expectation pressed on her more than ever. The council chamber had been tense all morning, and whispers had followed her through the corridors of the stronghold. The Lyran pack had never experienced anything like this before. The Alpha King Kale had approached her yesterday with an offer that would change the course of her life, and she had done something that no one in the pack could have imagined. She had rejected him. Kara remembered the moment clearly. The chamber had been filled with the low growl of anticipation, the hum of energy from warriors whose muscles were as strong as steel, whose loyalty was absolute. Kale had stood before her, taller than any human, with eyes as sharp and blue as frozen glaciers. His presence was commanding, terrifying even, yet beneath the strength, Kara had seen something else, a flicker of vulnerability, the weight of centuries of tradition resting on his shoulders. Kara, Kale had said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying the authority that could command the fiercest warriors into battle. I ask you to stand by my side. Not as an ally, not as a friend, but as my mate. The pack, the legacy of our ancestors, depends on this bond. Kara had looked into his eyes, steady and unwavering, and for the first time, she had spoken words that felt heavier than any weapon she had ever lifted. Alpha King, she had replied softly, I am honored by your offer, but I cannot accept it. My path is not yours to claim. I serve a purpose beyond the pack, and I must follow it. The room had gone silent. Silence in the Lyran council chamber was heavier than any roar. The warriors' ears twitched, tails stiffened, and eyes darted from Kale to Kara, unable to process the audacity of her answer. In the pack's history, rejection of an alpha's offer was unheard of. It was not just a personal choice, it was a challenge to tradition. To the unbroken chain of leadership and loyalty, Kale had not moved. His face had remained stoic, his eyes unreadable. Yet Kara had sensed the storm behind them, the struggle to suppress the emotions that simmered within him. The pack had waited for him to speak, to assert his authority, to command compliance. But he did not. Instead, he had stepped back, the faintest sign of hurt crossing his features. The following hours had been strange. The pack had gone silent around her, their usual chatter and laughter replaced by careful glances and whispered conversations behind claws and fur. Kara could feel the weight of their eyes on her, measuring her, questioning her. She had expected some hostility, perhaps even anger, but there was none. There was only a quiet tension, as though the world itself were holding its breath. Kara turned from the plateau, her boots crunching against the rocky ground as she descended toward the training yard. The warriors were practicing maneuvers, their movements precise, almost animalistic. Kale stood apart, watching his hands crossed behind his back, his jaw tight. Even in silence, he radiated authority. Kara had learned to read his expressions over the years, and she knew that today he was struggling, not with the pack, not with the threats outside their territory, but with himself, a young warrior. Ryan approached her, his fur bristling nervously. Kara, he said, voice low, are you sure about what you said in the council? I am, Kara replied calmly, without looking at him. I cannot be bound by traditions that are not mine. I respect Kale and the pack, but my choice must remain my own. Ryan nodded slowly, though his ears flicked anxiously toward the Alpha. It's just, no one has ever done this. Not to the Alpha King himself. Kara offered a small smile. Perhaps it is time someone did. As she spoke, a shadow passed over the yard. Kale had moved closer, his step silent, like the predator he was. He stopped a few meters away, his gaze fixed on her. "You understand the consequences of your choice," he said, his voice low, carrying an edge that made even the hardened warrior step back slightly. "I do," Kara replied, meeting his gaze without fear, "and I am ready to face them." Yeah. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Kale's expression softened just enough for Kara to see the man behind the legend, the centuries of responsibility, the weight of the pack, and the loneliness that came with power. Then, with a quiet nod, he turned and strode away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. That night, Kara slept under the open sky, the twin moons of Liranine casting a silvery light over the plains. The wind whispered through the jagged cliffs, and she felt the subtle energy of the pack surrounding her, protective yet wary. She knew that her rejection had set events into motion that neither she nor Kale could control. The pack was silent now, but the calm before a storm was never peaceful. The following morning brought the first signs of unrest. Whispers traveled through the stronghold, carrying tension like sparks across dry grass. Some warriors admired Kara's courage, while others questioned her audacity. Kale, despite his usual control, seemed restless. He moved through the halls with sharp eyes, his patience thinning, as if he were trying to anticipate every ripple caused by her decision. Kara immersed herself in training, honing her combat skills alongside the Lyran warriors. Though human, she had learned to match their strength and agility through technique, timing, and an understanding of strategy. She noticed the subtle ways the pack responded differently to her now. Some avoided her gaze, uncertain whether to treat her as an equal or a challenge to Kale's authority. Others, quieter and wiser, seemed to respect her even more, recognizing the courage it took to stand firm. It was during one of these sessions that the first real challenge emerged. A group of young warriors, brimming with strength but lacking control, began testing the limits of their power. Their movements became reckless, strikes too fast, swings too wide. Kara intercepted them with calm precision, redirecting their energy rather than confronting it head-on. Her tactics were human, unconventional for the pack, but effective. Kale had observed from the sidelines, his arms crossed. There was a flicker of approval in his eyes, but also a tension she could not ignore. His pride, his position, and the pack's expectations weighed heavily on him. Kara wondered if he would ever forgive her not for rejecting him personally, but for showing that human ingenuity could complement and, in some ways, surpass the traditional ways of the pack. The turning point came when a message arrived from the Border Scouts. A rival faction of the Lyran clans, long thought dormant, had mobilized. They were massing troops at the eastern frontier, ready to challenge Kale's authority. The pack needed to respond swiftly, and Kale called an emergency council. Kara entered the chamber, presence commanding attention without any intention of dominating. The warriors turned, ears alert, eyes narrow. Kale stood at the center, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. He addressed the council, but his voice carried an uncharacteristic strain. "The clans at the east border have grown restless," Kale said. "They believe the pack is weakened. They will test us. I expect full loyalty and readiness. No mistakes." There was murmuring among the council members, but Kara noticed subtle changes. Some warriors exchanged glances, their confidence shaken by Kale's unusual tension. The Alpha King's usual aura of absolute control was fractured. Kara stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "Kale, if I may," she said, "we cannot wait for the enemy to act. We must strengthen our positions and use strategies that they will not anticipate. If we combine human tactics with Lyran strength, we can protect the pack without unnecessary loss." The chamber fell silent. Whispers had stopped, and all eyes turned to her. Even Kale, though his jaw tightened, listened. For the first time, Kara saw him wrestle with something more than anger or pride. He was calculating, weighing the value of unconventional counsel against centuries of tradition. Kale finally nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Your input will be considered," he said, his voice firm, yet carrying a hint of restrained emotion. It was not approval, and it was not rejection. It was acknowledgement. For Kara, it was enough. She had survived the rejection of tradition, and lived to influence the Alpha King without bowing to him. As the council dispersed, Kara remained in the chamber, her thoughts heavy. She had accepted Kale's offer of partnership in her own way by standing firm in her independence. She knew the pack's silence was not over. It was waiting, watching. But she also knew that events were moving faster than anyone could predict. The eastern frontier was calling, and with it, the first real test of Kale's control over the pack came her place within it. Outside, the twin suns dipped below the cliffs, leaving only the pale glow of the moons. Kara stepped onto the balcony, feeling the cool breeze on her face. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the rival clans were preparing. Somewhere within the pack, the first seeds of doubt and rebellion were sprouting. The morning air was tense, heavy with the scent of metal and dust from the pack's training grounds. Kara moved through the ranks of warriors with quiet confidence, observing every movement. The eastern frontier was no longer a distant threat. It was alive with activity. Scouts had reported unusual troop movements, strange signals, and signs of a coordinated strike. Kara had spent hours analyzing maps and terrain with human precision, suggesting strategies that combined her knowledge of tactics with the pack's unparalleled strength. Yet, despite her insights, she could feel the subtle shifts among the warriors. Some respected her ideas, their eyes lighting with cautious curiosity. Others bristled, not at her presence, but at the fact that the Alpha had not immediately dismissed her counsel. Kale, as usual, stood apart, his towering form casting a long shadow over the courtyard. But today, his posture was slightly rigid, and the calm authority he normally exuded was tinged with tension. Kara approached him as he observed the training. "Kale," she said, careful to keep her tone respectful. "The scouts' report suggests that the clans are testing our defenses in multiple locations. They will try to force us into reacting before we are ready." Kale's blue eyes, sharp and intense, flicked to her. "And you believe we should not respond immediately?" "I believe we should prepare traps and ambushes using their assumptions against them," Kara explained. "If we let them make the first move, we gain the advantage. Acting too quickly could expose weaknesses they would exploit." Kale's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, Kara thought she saw doubt flicker across his face. It was fleeting, but it was enough. He nodded once, curtly. "Very well. Prepare your plans. I will review them before presenting them to the pack." The Alpha King's acceptance, quiet as it was, sent ripples through the warriors. Some whispered among themselves, amazed that Kara's advice had been considered. Others watched with wary eyes, unsure what this meant for the hierarchy they had always trusted. As the day progressed, the rival clans began their testing. Small patrols skirmished at the borders, sending scouts and minor raiding parties to probe defenses. The pack responded with disciplined maneuvers, but Kale's tension was evident. Commands were given sharply, but his usual fluid precision was fragmented. Kara noticed the difference and realized that Kale's struggle was not with the enemy, it was with his own sense of control. Kara suggested positioning a small group of human-trained scouts on the high cliffs, unseen but ready to ambush the intruders. The idea was unconventional for Lyran warriors, who relied on brute strength and instinct. Kale hesitated, his instincts warning him against such tactics. But after a moment, he allowed her to implement the plan. That night, the ambush was successful. The rival scouts had walked right into the trap, and the pack captured them with minimal effort. The warriors were impressed, murmuring about the humans' cleverness. Kale, however, remained silent, his eyes distant. Kara could see the storm in his mind, the Alpha King, a creature bred to dominate, wrestling with the need to accept help and the pride that demanded he rely only on himself. Despite the success, Kale's control over the pack began to show cracks. During a council meeting, subtle signs of unrest appeared. Some warriors questioned his decisions in hushed tones. Others grumbled about the Alpha's unusual hesitation and reliance on human counsel. Kara observed it all, understanding that the pack's stability rested on more than strategy, rested on the Alpha's confidence. The tension escalated when a second wave of attacks arrived. These were larger, more coordinated, and clearly intended to challenge Kale's leadership. The warriors were stretched thin, forced to defend multiple points along the frontier. Kara's plans were implemented, but even with careful strategy, the pack suffered minor losses. Kale's frustration began to show openly. He barked commands with more force than necessary, sometimes contradicting his own orders in the heat of battle. His voice, usually calm and authoritative, carried an edge that unsettled the warriors. Kara, sensing the danger, stepped forward during a critical engagement. "Hold the line here," she shouted, pointing to a narrow pass that would trap the enemy. "Let them come. Use their numbers against them." "Kale flanked from the left." Kale's eyes met hers, and for a moment he hesitated. The Alpha's pride warred with the practicality of her orders. Then, with a guttural growl, he gave the commands. The maneuver worked perfectly. The enemy was funneled into a narrow valley, where the pack's strength could overwhelm them. Victory was achieved, but at a cost. Several warriors were injured, and Kale's visible frustration did not dissipate. In the aftermath, the pack's murmurs grew louder. Whispers of doubt, usually silent, began circulating openly. Kara realized that this was the first true challenge the pack had faced under Kale since his rejection. And it had shaken more than just their defenses, it had shaken their belief in him. Later, Kara found Kale alone in the training yard, the twin moons casting pale light across his fur and armor. He was pacing, muscles tense, and his tail flicked with restless energy. Kara approached cautiously, aware that this alpha was a creature of both immense strength and deep emotion. "You are troubled," she said softly. Kale's eyes, sharp and stormy, met hers. "I have led the pack for centuries, Kara. We are creatures of instinct and tradition. Yet today, I am aware of my own limitations. I see it in the eyes of my warriors. They question me, and I cannot ignore it." "You are not weak, Kale," Kara replied. "You are human enough to see your limits and strong enough to overcome them. But the pack needs more than just brute strength. They need your courage, your clarity, and sometimes the humility to accept help." Kale growled softly, a sound of both frustration and acknowledgement. "I am unaccustomed to this, reliance. I am Alpha, the king. Yet your presence reminds me that even the strongest need allies." Kara nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "You are not losing control by accepting help, you are securing it. The pack needs a leader who is adaptable, who can respond to threats intelligently, not blindly. You are that leader, Kale. I am simply assisting, not replacing." For the first time that evening, Kale allowed himself a small, rare smile. It was fleeting, but it carried a silent trust. Kara knew then that the Alpha King, despite his pride, could evolve. But she also sensed that the rival faction within the pack, Kale's own blood and trusted warriors, would not wait patiently for him to regain control. They were watching, waiting for a misstep. For the moment when doubt would become rebellion, the following days were a test of endurance. The rival clans escalated their attacks, forcing the pack into a defensive posture. Kara's strategies proved invaluable, her human ingenuity turning potential disasters into victories. Yet, every success highlighted Kale's occasional hesitation, creating friction among the warriors. Some praised the victories, while others whispered that Kale had become too reliant on a human's counsel. Kara observed the tension with careful calculation. She understood the delicate balance between loyalty and dissent. One wrong move from Kale, and the pack could fracture from within. She began spending more time alongside the Alpha, subtly guiding maneuvers, offering advice, and preparing the warriors mentally for the challenges ahead. It was during one particularly brutal skirmish that Kale's control faltered completely. A rival commander, cunning and experienced, launched a feint that split the pack's forces. Kale's instinct was to charge, to confront the enemy head-on. But the maneuver required patience and precision. His pride clashed with the strategy Kara had laid out, and for a brief moment, chaos erupted. Warriors clashed, commands overlapped, and confusion spread. Kara acted immediately, redirecting troops, issuing precise orders, and coordinating counterattacks. Slowly, the pack regained cohesion. When the battle ended, Kale stood panting, his chest heaving, his eyes reflecting both frustration and admiration. You saved the pack," Kale said quietly, his voice low and raw. I could not control it alone. Kara shook her head. You could control it, Kale. You were testing yourself, just as you test your warriors. Sometimes the pack needs guidance from unexpected places. That does not make you weak. It makes you wise. Kale's gaze lingered on her, a mixture of respect, frustration, and something deeper he could not yet name. He did not speak further, but Kara understood. The Alpha King had glimpsed the truth that strength was not measured only by dominance, but by understanding strategy and courage to face oneself. As the twin moons rose high in the sky, Kara watched the pack regroup, tending to the wounded, sharpening weapons, and preparing for the inevitable next wave. She knew that Kale's struggle was far from over. The rival faction, sensing vulnerability, would act soon. And when they did, the Alpha King would either regain complete control or lose it entirely. Kara clenched her fists, feeling the familiar rush of determination. She had chosen her path, and she would not falter. The pack was a force unlike any other, and Kale was their heart. If the Alpha King could be reminded of his true strength, the pack would survive. But if he lost control, even for a moment, chaos could destroy everything they had fought for. The horizon glowed faintly with the first light of a new day. Kara's dark eyes scanned the eastern cliffs, where the enemy waited. Somewhere within the pack, uncertainty lingered. The sky above Laronin was unusually quiet, as if even the winds were waiting. Dawn approached slowly, casting a pale silver glow across the cliffs and plains. The pack stood ready at the eastern frontier, their armor gleaming in the moonlight, their claws sharpened, their ears alert. Every warrior sensed that the real battle was not with the rival clans outside their territory. It was within. Kara walked through the ranks with steady steps, her human form smaller than the towering Larin warriors around her, yet her presence felt just as strong. Every warrior she passed straightened their back. Some nodded with silent respect. Others avoided her gaze, unsure how to feel. She understood. Trust was not granted quickly in any species. Kale stood at the front, tall and imposing, his fur catching the light of the rising sun. His sapphire eyes, once calm and controlled, now flickered with stormy emotion. Kara could sense the turmoil inside him, duty, wrestling against doubt, tradition clashing with newfound change. The rival clans had sent a final message the night before. The Alpha King hesitates. His control is weak. We challenge his rule at sunrise. That sunrise had now arrived. The pack gathered in a semicircle around Kale. Behind them, on the cliffs, the rival clan forces began to appear one by one. Their leader, a broad-shouldered warrior with gray fur and crimson markings, stepped forward. Kale, the rival leader shouted across the open valley. You were strong once, but you rely on outsiders now. You hesitate. You doubt. You cannot lead. The pack shifted. Uneasy, Kara stayed silent, her eyes scanning both sides. She knew Kale had to answer not with anger, but with clarity. Kale stepped forward, voice steady. Strength is not blindness. Leadership is not noise. You mistake silence for weakness. That is your failure. The rival leader snarled. Then prove you still have control. Prove you can command your pack. Kale opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, one of his own stepped forward, a young but proud warrior named Jareth. His fur was dark bronze, and his pride was sharp. Alpha, Jareth said loudly, bowing only slightly. You have led us well in the past, but lately you hesitate. You follow human advice instead of instinct. We need to know if you still lead. The pack froze. This wasn't just a challenge from outside. It was from within. Kale's hands curled into fists. His breathing grew deep, heavy. Kara saw the signs. His control was slipping, not from weakness, but from emotion. Pride, hurt, pressure. The Alpha King was still strong, but he was one step away from losing himself. Kara stepped forward before anyone else could speak. Jareth, she said calmly, you question Kale's control. But control is not shown only in battle. It is shown in choice. in wisdom. Jareth turned to her, his voice tense. You do not understand our ways, human. Kara held his gaze without fear. I understand more than you think. You believe leadership must roar. But sometimes, leadership listens. Some warriors stirred, unsure. Kale watched silent, tense. Kara continued, her voice firm. Kale did not reject instinct. He embraced change. That is not weakness. It is strength. You doubt him because you have never seen a leader who can both fight and think. Jareth hesitated, but before he could respond, the rival clan leader roared, enough words. If Kale still has control, let him prove it in single combat. Every warrior stiffened. A one-on-one. Battle would decide everything. Kale stepped forward, but his steps were slower than usual. His shoulders heavy. Kara realized at once. He was not afraid of losing the fight. He was afraid of losing control during the fight. His emotions were barely contained. If they broke free, he could unleash a fury too great to stop. Even for himself, he would win the battle but lose himself. Kara made a decision. She stepped directly in front of Kale. Stop, she said. The pack gasped. Jareth stared. Even the rival clan paused. Kale's voice was low. Kara, move. She shook her head. No, Kale. His eyes widened, not in anger, but in disbelief. You do not need to fight alone, she said quietly, so only he could hear. You are alpha not because you stand alone, but because you make others stand with you. Stared at her for several seconds, then his breathing steadied, his shoulders relaxed slightly, his control returned not by force but through trust. He finally nodded, then he turned not to the rival leader but to his pack. Do not fight alone, Kale said, voice powerful again. A true alpha does not silence others. He strengthens them. If you doubt me, fight beside me. If you trust me, stand with me. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Jareth stepped forward, kneeling. Alpha, I stand with you. One by one, warriors followed, kneeling, bowing, committing. The rival clan leader growled in frustration. You refuse our challenge? Kale lifted his chin. I refuse to fight with pride alone. I fight with unity. And Kara spoke loudly. This is not Kale's battle alone. This is the pack's battle. She drew her weapon. Today's Lyranine will see strength not in one, but in many. The rival clan leader roared in rage and charged. The final battle began. The field exploded into motion. Warriors clashed with thunderous force. Claws met steel, roars shook the mountains. Kara moved through the chaos like lightning, calculating, precise. She guided small groups into ambush positions, turned scattered attacks into coordinated strikes. Kale fought with renewed claritine at wild rage, but controlled power. Every strike was measured. Every roar was a command that boosted his warriors' morale. At one point, Jareth was cornered by 3 enemy fighters. Before Kara could move, Kale leaped across the battlefield, landing with a quake-like impact. He shielded Jareth, striking down all 3 foes in one sweeping motion. Jareth stared at him with newfound loyalty. Alpha, I doubted. I was wrong. Kale gave a short nod. Then fight. Not behind me, but beside me. And Jareth did. The battle tilted in their favor. The rival clan began to retreat. But their leader refused to yield. He charged straight toward Kara, fury burning in his eyes. His claws raised to strike. Kara braced herself, but before the blow landed, Kale was there. He intercepted the attack with his forearm. Claws digging into his armor, but not breaking through. The rival leader growled, struggling against Kale's grip. You have softened. Kale's voice was deep and calm. No, I have grown. With one powerful motion, he disarmed the rival leader and forced him to the ground, but did not strike a finishing blow. Yield, Kale said. The rival leader growled again, but something in Kale's eyes made him pause slowly. He lowered his head. I yield. Silence fell over the battlefield. The pack watched. The enemy clan watched. Then Kale did something no alpha would have done before. He extended his hand. Stand. You fought with strength. Now fight with honor. The rival leader hesitated, then took the hand and stood. A wave of shock passed through warriors on both sides. Unity, not domination, had ended the conflict. Kara stood quietly. Watching Kale, the Alpha King looked at her not with authority, but with gratitude. Later, when the warriors gathered to celebrate, Kale approached her. You saved me, he said simply. Kara shook her head. I reminded you who you were. Kale's expression softened. And who am I? She smiled faintly. A leader who does not fear change? Kale looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something she did not expect, Kara. When I asked you before, I asked as a king. Paused. But now, I ask as someone who respects your path. Will you walk beside me? Not as tradition demands, but as choice allows. Kara met his gaze. There was no pressure, no weight of expectation, only sincerity. She nodded. I will walk beside you. As ally, as equal, Kale smiled, a real rare smile, and the pack, watching in silence, finally understood. She had rejected the Alpha, but she had accepted the king, not by submission, but by standing tall.